Today we're going to be looking at the Treaty of London in 1518. For some papers you'll be asked what you can infer from a source about a particular subject. In this instance, we're looking at what we can infer from the source about the Treaty of London. The first thing you will do is say one thing I can infer is, and then pick a point from the source. So in this case I'm going to say that Henry VIII was incredibly important for the Treaty of London. Then I would pick a point from the source which it shows that. So in this instance I would say because it shows Henry on a throne high above everybody else with people crowding around him. So what was the Treaty of London? Henry had already invaded France in 1513, which had been very expensive and had achieved virtually nothing. Although he'd had success at the Battle of the Spurs and captured Tournai and Terouanne, this hadn't been very long lasting, and the areas of land had been very limited in their worth. It had also been very expensive, and they hadn't achieved much considering the amount of money that they had spent and the men that they had lost. Francis wasn't really concerned with fighting England. He would rather invade and take land from northern Italy. When the Pope, who lived in Italy, appealed to Henry for help against Francis, Henry replied that he would help, saying, "If I choose, Francis will cross the Alps into Italy, and if I choose, he will not." This was really very much exaggerating his power, as he had neither the money nor the men to stop Francis. Wolsey worked tirelessly to build up allies who would help England against France, but he failed, as no one wanted to lose a war against France. By 1515, Francis had successfully invaded Italy, won a major battle and taken land. Henry was very upset at this, as this is what he had wanted to do. Henry felt useless in Europe, while Francis received all the glory. So, then in 1518, the Turks changed everything. A Muslim army from Turkey, part of the Ottoman Empire, attacked Italy. In response, the Pope appealed to Christian rulers of Europe for help. Wolsey took the idea and made it his own. He saw the opportunity to place England at the centre of European affairs. He called a large meeting in London, inviting all the rulers of Europe to send their ambassadors. This led to the Treaty of Universal Peace, often referred to as the Treaty of London, and this was a prelude to helping the Pope. Part of this was a peace agreement between England and France, where they arranged the marriage of Henry's baby daughter Mary to the son of Francis I. This treaty said that all countries in Europe would live peacefully and non-aggressively with each other, and if anyone broke the peace, then other countries would punish the treaty breaker. This was known as collective security. This meant that neither Spain, nor France, nor England could attack each other. This treaty was called a moral and diplomatic triumph at the time, and it was signed by over 20 leaders. For Henry and Wolsey, it was important as it had taken place in London, making it the centre of events. Henry now looked like the man who had united the whole of Europe in peace, whilst Wolsey had done all the work. Henry took the glory. So, what were the successes of the treaty? Firstly, it brought Henry much prestige, as he was now seen to be a great European peacemaker. England started to be viewed as a significant power within Europe. It placed Henry and Wolsey at the centre of European politics as the creators of European peace, and it was praised across Europe as a political and diplomatic triumph. Lastly, the marriage alliance between England and France was agreed. However, there were some failures as well. The treaty didn't last. By 1521, the war between France and Spain, the Habsburgs, had restarted. In 1519, Charles had been elected the Holy Roman Emperor, which Francis and Henry had also tried to get. This meant that he was much more powerful than Henry and Francis, and this was crucial in Europe as it transformed European politics and made war between Charles and Francis inevitable for three reasons. Firstly, Francis I had hoped to gain the post of Holy Roman Emperor, but Charles had been chosen instead. France was now surrounded by the Habsburg lands, and as Emperor of the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles had inherited a claim to the Duchy of Milan, which the French controlled at that time. This was bound to lead to warfare. So, overall, the things you should be looking at is deciding whether or not this was a success or a failure. You should also think about why the Treaty of London took place in the first place, what the key features of the Treaty of London were, what the successes of the Treaty of London were and whether they were short-term or long-term, and the failures of the Treaty of London. To extend yourself when you're revising, you need to think about what the successes were long-term as well as short-term, and then compare it to other campaigns or decide whether it was more or less successful than the Battle of the Spurs or the Field of the Cloth of Gold. Thank you for listening. This has been C.L. Barber. For more revision materials, please subscribe to C.L. Barber 1977.